Sudan accuses Ethiopia of violating its border with Sudan. Sudan has accused Ethiopia of intruding into its territory and carrying out attacks, calling it a clear violation of its sovereignty and an act of aggression. The Sudanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in a statement issued on Monday, February 22, 2018, indicated that it had been monitoring the entry of drones originating from Ethiopian territory into the country in February and early January. He also stated that the drones targeted locations in Sudan but did not provide any details about the locations attacked or the damage caused. The Sudanese government has called the alleged drone violation by Ethiopia a reckless and unacceptable act that could lead to further consequences. The Sudanese Foreign Ministry statement, which was issued in Arabic, said it had the right to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity and had the capacity to respond in various ways if this behavior continued. The BBC's repeated attempts to get a response from the Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs on the charges were unsuccessful. In the ongoing civil war between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Response Force, the army led by al-Burhan is accused of aiding its rival. The Ethiopian government has repeatedly stated that weapons and militants are entering the territory from Sudan. Last month, Reuters reported, citing various sources and satellite images, that Ethiopia had a training camp for rapid response forces in its territory bordering Sudan. The Ethiopian government has not yet confirmed or denied this. Despite various reports that various countries, including Ethiopia, are supporting one side in the ongoing civil war in Sudan, all countries have denied it. In particular, the United Arab Emirates, a close ally of Ethiopia, is accused of supporting the Sudanese Rapid Response Force, led by Hamdan Dagalo, which is fighting the Egyptian-backed Sudanese army. There have been reports that Sudanese military leader General al-Burhan, who has been opposing Ethiopia by siding with Egypt over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, has strained relations with Ethiopia. Sudan and Egypt are pushing Ethiopia to sign a binding agreement regarding the dam, fearing that Ethiopia's completion of Africa's largest hydroelectric dam will reduce the amount of water flowing into their territories from the Nile. Ethiopia, however, rejected the proposal by the two countries, citing that the dam would not prevent the flow of the river. It is also known that Ethiopia and Sudan have had a long-standing dispute over the ownership of the fertile Al-Fashqa area. Somalia's federal parliament approves official constitution in historic joint session vote. Federal Parliament of Somalia has formally approved the country's official constitution following the completion of a comprehensive review and amendment process covering chapters 1 through 13. In a joint sitting of both houses, the House of the People and the Upper House, lawmakers endorsed the constitution by an overwhelming majority vote. A total of 223 members, including 186 members of the House of the People and 37 senators of the Upper House, voted in favor of the adoption. The session was chaired by the Speaker of the House of the People, Honorable Sheikh Adan Mohammed Nur Madobi, who officially announced the results, declaring that the Constitution of the Somalia had been lawfully approved and would enter into force nationwide. The official Constitution of the Federal Republic of Somalia has been legally adopted and will now take effect across the country, the Speaker said. The approval marks a historic milestone in Somalia's state-building process. Lawmakers described the move as a critical step toward completing the constitutional framework, strengthening constitutional institutions, and consolidating the federal system of governance. A historic step for Somalia. The revised constitution has been approved, marking major progress in strengthening democratic institutions, clarifying the federal system, and moving the country beyond the long-standing provisional framework, Ali Mohammed Omar, a state minister of foreign affairs and members of the federal parliament, said. The review and amendment process, which address provisions across all 13 chapters, is seen as central to clarifying the division of powers, reinforcing democratic governance, and enhancing institutional stability. The adoption of the Constitution represents a significant advancement in Somalia's ongoing efforts to solidify its federal structure and advance long-term political stabilization and nation building. After 52 years, Somalia's new labor code comes to life through nationwide workers' rights campaign. The Federation of Somali Trade Unions, FESTU, with the support of the United Nations, UN, has rolled out a nationwide labor rights education campaign aimed at enabling workers to understand, reclaim, and defend their labor rights, while ensuring effective implementation of Somalia's newly adopted labor code, which entered into force after 52 years without comprehensive reform. The new labor code was developed through sustained social dialogue and negotiations among Somalia's tripartite constituencies, the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, MOLSA, the Somali Chamber of Commerce and Industry, SCCI, and FESTU, with technical and financial support from the International Labor Organization, ILO. The draft text was agreed collectively before being submitted to the Council of Ministers and subsequently approved by both houses of the Federal Parliament of Somalia, after which the President of the Federal Republic of Somalia assented to it and signed it into law. Under the ambit of FESTU and its 12 affiliated national unions, organized labor campaigned relentlessly for more than 10 years to secure this reform in line with international labor standards and Somalia's international human rights obligations. FESTA described the reform as a historic affirmation that labor rights are human rights and that the rights of working people cannot be ignored. For 52 years, Somalia's working women and men were governed by an outdated and unjust legal framework that no longer reflected the realities of modern workplaces and that was inconsistent with the Constitution of Somalia and Somalia's international human rights obligations, including global labor standards, said Omar Farouk Osman, General Secretary of FESTU. It is on this basis that our persistent efforts delivered this new labor code. But any law is only meaningful when the people concerned, predominantly the workers, understand the rights enshrined in it, claim their rights, and stand ready to defend them. This law confirms that dignity at work, protection from exploitation, and freedom from harassment are fundamental human rights. Between October and December 2025, FESTU implemented the Labor Rights Education Program in partnership with the United Nations Transitional Mission in Somalia, UNTMIS, and the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, under the Joint Program on Human Rights Phase 2. The initiative focused on strengthening workers' capacity to demand and defend labor rights across Mogadishu and the federal member states, working closely with its 12 affiliated unions to ensure nationwide outreach and sustainability. The program began with a national launch event and workshop in Mogadishu, in the presence of officials from the UN, trade unions, and the federal government of Somalia. It was followed by activities in Baidoa in Southwest State, Duzamareb in Galmudug State, and Beledweyne in Hirshabelle State, where workers from different economic sectors were educated on the new legal framework governing the world of work in Somalia. In addition, a specialized training session for women and young workers was held in Mogadishu to strengthen their understanding of the rights enshrined in the law and how young workers can claim their rights and resist exploitation and abuse while pursuing decent work. Further dedicated training for workers who are persons with disabilities took place in Mogadishu, marking the first time that persons with disabilities receive sessions specifically tailored to their labor rights and inalienable right to inclusion and equal treatment. Altogether, 218 workers were trained during the program. Of these, 98 were women and 120 were men. Youth workers accounted for 152 participants, while 66 were older workers. The program ensured strong inclusion of workers with disabilities, with 53 persons with disabilities participating overall, including 22 women and 31 men. To ensure continuity and deepen understanding beyond the training period, at least 2 participants from each training session were selected as peer educators, creating a network of trained worker educators who will continue raising awareness through FESTA's 12 affiliated unions in workplaces and communities across the country. To complement face-to-face training, FESTA developed and distributed more than 3,200 printed information, education, and communication materials in 2 Somali dialects, Maxatiri and Mai. These materials explained workers' rights and obligations under the Labor Code, as well as the responsibilities of employers and government institutions in respecting and enforcing the law. The materials were disseminated during workshops and through union structures nationwide. In parallel, 12 radio and television spots were produced and broadcast nationwide. Digital outreach through Facebook and X generated 206,227 engagements during October and November 2025, including 56,796 in October and 149,431 in November. The campaign also recorded 13,011 reactions over the same period. Combined broadcasting and digital dissemination reached an estimated audience of more than 2.3 million people nationwide. The program placed a particular emphasis on equality and protection. Women represented 45% of total participants. The specialized workshop for women and young workers addressed sexual violence and harassment prevention, reporting pathways and legal safeguards under the Labor Code, including references to the Violence and Harassment Convention, 2019, number 190 of the ILO, which Somalia has ratified and domesticated. The dedicated training for persons with disabilities focused on non-discrimination, reasonable accommodation, legal guarantees, occupational safety and health, and access to complaint mechanisms. As part of the broader campaign, the senior leadership of Festu engaged the federal government of Somalia, particularly Molsa and the Office of the Prime Minister, to advocate for enforcement of labor code provisions addressing sexual and gender-based violence in workplaces, especially to provide necessary protection for women workers. Government representatives committed to taking action and strengthening enforcement measures in line with the amended law. Through education, organization, and solidarity, we are turning this new law into a living instrument that protects rights at work, including protection against exploitation, ensuring fair wages, guaranteeing safety, and promoting equality. Omar said, "Labor rights are human rights, and they must be respected in practice. A law adopted by the Federal Parliament of Somalia must translate into protection in every workplace." The nationwide labor rights education campaign comes as Somalia prepares for the Universal Periodic Review. FESTA remains committed to promoting decent work for youth and combating exploitation in line with Sustainable Development Goals 8, decent work and economic growth, and 10, reduced inequalities. FESTA praised the UN Human Rights and Protection Group and the OHCHR representative for helping the workers in Somalia and called the initiative an important move to implement the new labor code in Mogadishu and the federal member states, emphasizing that open communication is essential for fair and stable working relationships in Somalia, where workers' basic rights are respected.